Cinderella. Once upon a time, there was a girl named Cinderella. All Cinderella did all day, every day, was scrub the floor, do the laundry, cook the meals, and wash the dishes. Cinderella lived with her stepmother and stepsisters, Ivy and Esmeralda. They made her do all the work around the house while they did nothing at all. One day, an invitation arrived for a ball at the castle hosted by the prince. Every maiden in the kingdom was invited. The stepsisters couldn't wait. They went through their closets to find their fanciest gowns to wear to the ball. Cinderella dreamed of going to a ball at the castle. "May I borrow a dress to wear to the ball?" she asked her stepsisters hopefully.
"You,"
Esmeralda jeered.
"You're not invited."
"But I thought everyone was invited," protested Cinderella. "Cinderella," Ivy continued, "you have too much work to do. No ball at the castle for you." On the day of the ball, Cinderella desperately wanted to see the castle and get a peek at the ball, so she followed her stepmother and stepsisters. As the stepsisters entered, Cinderella admired the castle from afar, wishing that she could go inside. She looked down at her old dress, wishing she had a fancy dress too. "Oh, how I wish I had something to wear so that I could go to the ball too," Cinderella cried. Then, out of nowhere, a magical little woman appeared.
"Did I hear someone say, 'wish'?"
she asked, smiling. "Who are you?" Cinderella asked.
"Why, I'm your fairy godmother, of course. I'm here to make your wish come true."
"You can really make my wish come true?" asked Cinderella.
"Of course I can. Watch this,"
said her fairy godmother with a wave of her wand. Sparkles rained down on Cinderella, and she watched in amazement as her old dress turned into a beautiful white gown, complete with a set of glass slippers on her feet.
"Off you go to the ball, my dear,"
said her fairy godmother.
"But please remember one thing. You must leave before midnight. That's when the magic will end, and you will be back in your old clothes."
"I will," promised Cinderella, "and thank you, fairy godmother." When Cinderella entered the castle, no one recognized her, not even her own stepsisters. The prince noticed her immediately and asked her to dance. They danced all night long. Cinderella was having such a good time that she forgot all about her fairy godmother's warning until she heard the chimes of the clock. Oh no! It was midnight! Cinderella ran out of the castle as fast as she could before the magic ended. She didn't want the prince to see her in her old clothes. The prince chased after her, but all he found was one of her glass slippers. The prince was determined to find the girl he danced and laughed with all night long. He made sure every girl in the kingdom tried on the glass slipper. When he found the girl whose foot fit into the shoe, he would invite her back to the castle. On hearing this, the stepsisters did everything they could to fit into the glass slipper, but nothing worked. It didn't fit. "May I try the glass slipper?" asked Cinderella. Her stepsisters laughed. "Go ahead, but it won't fit you," Ivy teased.
"I don't think you're the princess the prince had in mind,"
said Esmeralda. But to their surprise, Cinderella's foot slid easily into the glass slipper. It was a perfect fit. "But how?" Ivy sputtered. "Well, I had some help from my fairy godmother," Cinderella replied. With that, the fairy godmother reappeared and transformed Cinderella once again into a beautiful princess.
"There you are, my dear. This dress is perfect for you. Better than those old rags. Now go find your prince,"
said the fairy godmother.
"How do we get a fairy godmother?"
Esmeralda wondered. Cinderella returned to the castle to see the prince. Every day they went for long walks on the palace grounds, talking and laughing. They fell in love and were married. Everyone in the kingdom was invited, even Cinderella's stepmother and stepsisters. The end. The Valentine Contest. It was almost Valentine's Day in the kingdom, and everyone was excited, especially King Carlos and Princess Anna. "Look at all the decorations!" Princess Anna exclaimed. King Carlos looked around happily.
Valentine's Day is my favorite day because we get to show people how much we love them, and everyone gets to dance.
Princess Anna looked at King Carlos. "Father, every year I dance by myself at the Valentine's Day party. This year, can I have someone dance with me?" King Carlos thought.
That's a nice idea. I think I know how to find just the right person.
King Carlos issued a royal decree to the townspeople.
Hear ye, hear ye! There is going to be a Valentine's Day contest. Make a Valentine present for Princess Anna and bring it to the castle. Princess Anna will choose the Valentine she likes the best, and the winner will get to dance with her at the party all night long. Good luck to all of you.
There were 3 townspeople who wanted to win the contest more than anyone else: Knight Lorenzo, Pedro the baker, and Morris the monster.
"I know just what I'm going to make for Princess Anna, so I'm going to win the contest,"
said Knight Lorenzo.
"I know what to make for Princess Anna too, so I'm going to win the contest,"
said Pedro the baker.
"I know what I'm going to make for Princess Anna. Well, I think I do. I hope I can win the contest,"
said Morris the monster softly. In his castle, Knight Lorenzo got to work making his Valentine.
"I love dragons, so Princess Anna must too,"
said Knight Lorenzo as he sprinkled red glitter on his Valentine.
What princess wouldn't love a glittery dragon Valentine? I know I'm going to win the contest and dance with Princess Anna.
Meanwhile, Pedro the baker was busy in his bakery.
"I love cookies, so Princess Anna must too,"
said Pedro the baker as he added pink frosting to his cookie Valentine.
What princess wouldn't want a chewy, gooey chocolate chip Valentine cookie? I know I'm going to win the contest and dance with Princess Anna.
In his cave, Morris the monster was wondering what to put on his Valentine. Said Morris.
"I think I know what Princess Anna likes."
Then he got to work. First, Morris glued 3 wiggly worms to his Valentine. Next, he smeared gobs of muddy mud across the top. And last, he found a big, buggy, googly eye and plopped it right in the center. Morris looked at the Valentine. His Valentine looked back at him.
What princess wouldn't want a wormy, muddy, googly-eyed Valentine? I hope I win the contest. I really want to dance with Princess Anna.
It was time for the Valentine's Day party. Knight Lorenzo arrived first.
Look at my glittery dragon Valentine. This is the winning Valentine, don't you think?
Next, Pedro the baker arrived.
Make way for my chewy, gooey chocolate chip Valentine cookie! Contest winner coming through. This one will win, right?
Morris the monster was the last to arrive.
Look at my yucky Valentine,
he said.
I really hope Princess Anna likes it. Do you think she'll like my Valentine the best?
Ew!
Cried Knight Lorenzo.
That is one yucky Valentine,
said Pedro the baker. But Morris just smiled. It was a yucky Valentine. The yuckiest. King Carlos welcomed his party guests.
Now, Princess Anna will decide which Valentine wins the contest,
boomed King Carlos.
Behold, my glittery dragon Valentine!
cried Knight Lorenzo. Wow, that is very glittery, said Princess Anna.
Ta-da! It's my chewy, gooey chocolate chip Valentine cookie!
cheered Pedro the baker. That looks very sweet, said Princess Anna.
Here is my Valentine. I put worms and mud and a googly eye on it just for you.
That is one yucky Valentine, said Princess Anna. Morris felt flustered, and his Valentine started to slip and slide right out of his furry hands. The wiggly worms went sliding. The muddy mud went splat. And the eyeball rolled and rolled and rolled, right into the middle of the heart-shaped dance floor. Morris looked at his Valentine. His Valentine looked back at Morris.
My yucky Valentine is ruined,
sighed Morris.
Now I'll never win the contest.
Princess Anna stepped forward, smiling. Thank you for all these wonderful Valentines. The winner of the contest made a Valentine that speaks to my heart and tells me we are meant to dance together. And the winner is... Morris the Monster! Morris couldn't believe his ears. Morris the Monster, she said, you have made the yuckiest Valentine I have ever seen. And I love yucky things. I made a Valentine too, said Princess Anna as she pulled her Valentine out from behind her back. Morris looked at Princess Anna's Valentine. And Princess Anna's Valentine looked back at Morris. Princess Anna and Morris laughed.
Princess Anna,
said Morris,
you made the yuckiest Valentine of all, and I love it!
King Carlos scratched his head, but then proclaimed,
We have a winner of the Valentine's contest. Morris the Monster, you like yucky things as much as my Princess Anna. Let the Valentine dance party begin!
Happy Valentine's Day, said Princess Anna.
Let's boogie!
cried Morris the Monster, and he and Princess Anna danced together all night long. The end. The Frog Prince.
Once upon a time, there was a young princess who left her fine castle and wandered out into the woods. She held a golden ball in her hand, her favorite plaything, and as she walked, she amused herself by tossing it into the air. Soon the princess came to a stream of cool, dark water. She sat down next to the stream and tossed her ball higher and higher. At last, she threw it so high that when she stretched out her hands to catch it, the ball bounced away and rolled along the ground. Splash! Right into the water. The princess frowned as she searched for her ball, but the water was dark and deep. So deep, the princess could not see the bottom. She began to weep, and as her tears fell, she cried, "Oh dear, if I could only have my beautiful golden ball back, I would give all my fine clothes and jewels, everything I have in the world." Suddenly, a frog popped its head out of the water and asked,
"Princess, why do you weep so bitterly?"
"Ugh," the princess cried. "What can you do for me, you nasty frog? You are no help. My golden ball is fallen into the water." The frog replied,
"I do not want your pearls and jewels. I do not want your fine clothes. But if you will love me and let me live with you and eat from your little golden plate and sleep upon your golden bed, I will bring you your ball again."
"What nonsense this silly frog talks," thought the princess. "The water is just far too deep for him. He will never get out. But still, he might be able to find my ball. I will promise what he asks." And with that, the princess replied, "All right, you have my word. If you will bring me my ball, I promise to do as you ask." With a loud splash, the frog leaped into the stream and dove down, down, down into the cool, dark water. Soon he returned carrying the ball in his mouth. He tossed it on the ground right at the feet of the princess. As soon as she saw her golden ball, the princess squealed with delight and rushed to pick it up. Overjoyed to have her precious toy, she forgot all about the frog. She turned and raced home as fast as she could. The frog called after her,
"Come back, princess. Come back and take me with you. You promised."
But the princess ignored his cries. The next evening, just as the princess was sitting down to dinner, she heard a strange noise. Tap, tap, tap on the great marble staircase. Rap, rap, rap on the huge oak door. Someone knocked gently and said,
"Open the door, my princess dear. Open the door to thy true love here. You made a promise that you must keep. Please invite me in the castle to go to sleep."
Princess ran to the door and opened it, and who would she see but the frog? The princess slammed the door, locked it tight, and dashed back to the table, shaking with fear. Her father, the king, said,
"My poor daughter, what has you so afraid? You are pale as death."
"A horrible frog is at the door. He retrieved my ball for me when it fell in the stream, and I promised them that he could live with me here because I thought he could never escape from the deep water. But there he is at the door, and he wants to come in." As the princess spoke, rap, 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 came another knock at the door. Again, the frog said,
"Open the door, my princess dear. Open the door to thy true love here. You made a promise you must keep. Please invite me in the castle to go to sleep."
"You have made a promise,
the king told his daughter.
and you must keep it. Go, let the frog in."
The princess did as she was commanded, and the frog hopped into the room right up onto the banquet table.
"Lift me up on the chair, if you please,"
said the frog.
"and let me sit next to you."
No sooner had the princess done this than the frog said,
"Put your plate closer to me that I may eat."
She did this also. Then when the frog had eaten his fill, he yawned and said,
I'm tired. Carry me upstairs and put me in your golden bed."
So the princess took him up in her hand and put him upon a pillow of her own little bed where he slept all night long. As soon as the sun rose, the frog woke up, jumped from the bed, hopped downstairs, and disappeared. "Good riddance," thought the princess. "He is finally gone and won't bother me any more." But the princess was mistaken. When nightfall came, rap, 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 came a knock at the door. Princess opened the door again, and who should she see but the frog? He hopped on in as if the castle was his very own home, and once again slept upon the princess's pillow till morning broke. The third night, the same thing happened again. But when the princess awoke on the following morning, she was astonished to see a handsome prince with beautiful dark eyes gazing at her, eyes as dark as the cool, deep stream. Where was the frog?
"Don't be afraid, dear princess. I am the frog,"
murmured the prince.
"An evil fairy enchanted me and said I would remain a frog forever until a beautiful princess should take me from the stream, let me sleep upon her bed for 3 nights. You have broken this cruel charm, sweet lady. My deepest wish is that you return with me to my father's kingdom, where I will marry you and love you for as long as we both shall live."
The young princess quickly agreed. No sooner had she said yes than the splendid carriage drove up to the castle. It was pulled by 8 white stallions decked with golden harnesses. It carried the charming couple full of joy to the prince's kingdom, where they lived happily ever after.
The end. The Princess and the Pea.
Now, there are many stories about princesses, and many people who think they know what it means to be a princess. This story is a reminder that things aren't always what they seem. Once upon a time, there was a powerful queen who was used to getting what she wanted. She accepted nothing less than the best, and she wanted nothing but the best for her son. She only clothed him in the finest suits, only fed him gourmet foods, and hired the smartest teachers in all the land to educate him. So when it was time for him to be married, she told him, "Son, you deserve the best woman in the whole world. Do not settle for just any pretty face. A prince must be married to a princess," she told him as he listened intently. "But remember," said the queen, "a real princess is not just the daughter of a king and queen. A real princess is delicate and refined and eats only the finest foods. She is well educated and reads only the greatest books and poems. She wears the loveliest dresses and carries herself with grace and dignity. But the first thing you will notice, a real princess has the voice of an angel." With that, the prince set off with his servants in search of his princess. After he had traveled for several days, he reached another kingdom. When he came to the castle, he introduced himself as the prince of the neighboring kingdom. When he met the king and queen, they were immediately impressed by how handsome and polite he was, and thought it would be a good idea to introduce the prince to their daughter, a princess who was not yet married. They brought the prince to the princess's study, where she was busy reading poetry as a servant fixed her hair. The prince was happy to see that she was very beautiful, and she smiled at the prince as he greeted her. "Hello, princess," said the prince. "Hello," squawked the princess, her voice hoarse and cracking. Are you all right, princess?" asked the prince. "Can I bring you a glass of water?" "No, I'm not thirsty," replied the princess, smiling politely. "Well, it was lovely meeting you," said the prince nervously. "I must be going. It is very late." As he left, he felt badly for leaving so abruptly, but he reminded himself of what his mother said. A real princess has the voice of an angel. The good part was that it was actually not late at all. The prince had plenty of time to set out for the next kingdom, where he again found the castle and asked to meet the king and queen. Again, he was so charming that he was immediately invited to meet the unmarried princess of the kingdom. This time, the king and queen led the prince to the castle's dining hall. This princess was also very beautiful, but when the prince entered, she hardly looked at him. She was sitting at the table eating like a pig with food dripping from her face and hands. Hello, princess," said the prince, squeaking hurriedly. It looks like you're very busy, so I'll just leave you alone with your food." He continued on, through valleys and over endless stretches of plains. But at each castle he stopped at, he met only disappointment. Finally, the prince gave up and returned home, still unmarried and very disappointed by his very long journey. When he arrived at his own castle, his mother and father greeted him. The prince told his parents the whole story of his journey. His mother was especially sad for him, but also glad he had not chosen to marry any of the princesses he met. That night, during a terrible thunderstorm, there was a knock at the door. A servant went to answer the door, and a young woman stood outside, dressed in a heavy cloak soaking wet from the rain. The prince happened to be walking past, but when he heard the voice of the young woman, he stopped in his tracks. She explained to the servant, "My driver got lost in the rain, and we saw the light from your castle. Would you be kind enough to provide us shelter for the night?" She had the voice of an angel, and the prince knew immediately that this must be his princess. He quickly ran up and excused the servant. "Of course you are welcome to stay here, good lady," he said, bowing respectfully. "Allow me to take your coat." When she pulled the hood off her head, the prince thought that she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen in his life. "Thank you so much, kind sir." The prince was so excited, he ran to tell his mother what had happened, but she scoffed. "My dear son, she is no princess," she said. "What kind of princess goes out in the rain knocking on doors in the middle of the night? Shouldn't she have a servant for that?" She peeked out into the hall to get a look at the girl, and was appalled to see the girl in plain clothes with dripping wet hair. "You see, she is no more than a common peasant." "But mother," argued the prince, "look at how she walks. I've never seen anything more graceful." The queen could see that her son had already fallen for the girl, so she quickly devised a plan to get rid of her. "All right then, if you don't believe me, we'll put her to a test. Tonight, we will dress her bed with 20 of the softest, fluffiest, most luxurious feather mattresses in the castle. Then, Under the 20 mattresses, we will place a single uncooked pea. If this pea disturbs her sleep, then we will know only a real princess would be delicate and refined enough to feel the pea. The prince didn't think that anyone would be able to feel the pea, but he also knew that his mother knew best. Besides, he thought, he had to marry a real princess. So, the queen ordered her servants to gather the best mattresses they could find and bring them to the guest tower. She took a single pea and put it right in the middle of the bed and had the servants stack all the mattresses on top. Then, the prince escorted the guest to her room, where she needed a ladder just to get on the bed. In the morning, the prince went into the dining hall and peeked inside to get a look at his love. She looked terrible. She had dark circles under her eyes and was sipping a large cup of tea. "I am so tired," the princess told a servant. "Please do not tell the prince that bed is awful. I felt like there was a brick inside it. I did not sleep a wink all night. I am so tired." The prince rushed over to her side and knelt before her. "You are a true princess, aren't you? Please marry me and live here, and I will get you any mattress you choose." The princess looked shocked, but then smiled and said, "Yes, I will marry you, as long as I don't have to sleep on that bed ever again." The next day, after the princess got a good night's sleep without a pea to disturb her, the prince and princess were married, and they lived happily ever after.
The end. Thumbelina.
Once upon a time, there lived a lonely old woman. She had dreamed all her life of having a daughter she could take care of and tell stories to, but the years had gone by and her dream never came true. One day, sad and desperate from spending all of her time alone in her quiet little cottage, she decided to visit her neighbor, the witch, to see if she could help her have a child. The witch took pity on the woman and gave her a shiny pink seed, saying, "Put this in the ground, and if you tend to it with lots of water and sunshine, you will have your wish." The woman did as she was told, and after 1 week, a radiant rose blossomed. In the center of the flower was a beautiful child with golden hair and skin as soft as flower petals. The old woman was delighted and immediately picked the girl up and gave her a tiny hug. "I will call you Thumbelina," she declared, "for you are no bigger than my thumb." For many years, Thumbelina and the old woman lived in peace. The girl slept in a bed made from a walnut shell with a teeny marshmallow for a mattress. Thumbelina loved the old woman very much. But one summer night, when the old woman was asleep, a giant toad hopped through an open window and kidnapped Thumbelina. The toad carried the poor girl away, declaring, "I have never seen such a pretty little creature before. You will make the perfect bride for my handsome son, Mortimer." When they reached the toad's pond and she set Thumbelina down before her son, Thumbelina started crying. He was scary, slimy, and covered in warts. All Thumbelina wanted to do was go home. "She is wonderful," croaked Mortimer when he saw Thumbelina. "Mother, you have made an excellent choice. I demand that we hold the wedding as soon as it is light. Until then, put her on a lily pad in the middle of the pond so that she cannot get away." Thumbelina spent hours sobbing in the dark. How would she ever get out of this terrible mess? But just when she thought all hope was lost, 2 little critters nibbled through the lily pad's stem and began to set her free. "We have heard you crying," declared the critters, "and we want to help you escape the horrible toad." Thumbelina thanked her friends and was relieved to get away from the icky toad, but she was also scared as she floated down the water. She had never been this far from home before, and everything around her looked so big. For many days, Thumbelina wandered around, living off of flower nectar and dewdrops. Soon the weather turned cold. Cold and exhausted, she eventually stumbled upon a tiny cottage. She knocked on the door, hoping to find some shelter for the night. It was answered by a furry brown field mouse. "Well, what do we have here?" asked the mouse when he saw the tired and shivering Thumbelina. "You poor child, come in and warm yourself by the fire. I have plenty of food and room for you to sleep. All I ask for in return is your good company and for help cleaning up the house." Thumbelina gladly agreed, telling the mouse that she would stay with him through the winter, then set out to find her way home again in the spring. For weeks, Thumbelina and the mouse lived happily together. She knit them both tiny socks to keep their feet warm, and at night they told each other stories. Thumbelina told the mouse about the kind old woman, and he told Thumbelina about his 500 brothers and sisters. Then one morning after breakfast, the mouse told Thumbelina that his friend the mole would be coming to pay them a visit. I told him all about you when you first arrived, and he is so anxious to meet you. He is very elegant and very rich. If you're lucky, he might even want to marry you. Thumbelina did not like this. But I don't want to marry anyone. I just want to go home. Of course you do, dear. Just wait until you meet him, though. He is so wealthy that if you marry him, you will have anything you can ever dream of. Before Thumbelina could argue, she heard a loud scratching sound coming from the ground. Suddenly, a large, hairy creature popped out of a hole near the door. Thumbelina was horrified. The mole was so big and had huge, sharp claws. Although his eyesight was bad, he could tell how beautiful Thumbelina was by the soft sound of her voice and immediately proposed to her. Too scared to refuse, Thumbelina agreed to live underground with him. As the wedding date was set, though, Thumbelina quickly regretted her decision. First of all, the mole's house was dark and dreary. Thumbelina missed the sun's warm kiss and felt terribly lonely. And whenever she complained to the mole, all he would do was buy her a present and tell her not to worry about it. One afternoon, Thumbelina decided to go exploring. She hated the dark and dreary nature of the mole's home and ventured to the woods outside. Immediately she saw a beautiful swallow lying on its side, obviously in pain. Thumbelina ran to help the bird whose wing was torn. Thumbelina began to nurse the poor swallow back to health, and every day would come to check on how well he was healing. "Thank you so much for helping me," the swallow declared. "I tore my wing on a thorn and was unable to follow my friends south for the winter. Somehow I stumbled into this forest. I didn't think I would ever get out. How could I possibly repay you?" Thumbelina told the swallow about her engagement to the mole. The wedding day was approaching, and she begged him to save her. "That is terrible," the swallow exclaimed, and together they worked out a plan. On the eve of Thumbelina's wedding, she asked the mole if she could spend a few last hours outside in the sun before promising to live underground with him forever. He agreed, and when she went outside, the swallow, whose wing had fully healed, flew down and rescued her. Although he did not know how to get her home, he promised to do the next best thing and flew her to a land of flowers filled with little people just like her. It was the most beautiful sight Thumbelina had ever seen. Rows of colored roses, lilies, and lilacs lined the earth, and in the middle of it all, a single red rose shined above them all. There lived the king of the flower fairies, and when Thumbelina and the king saw each other, they both immediately fell in love. The king quickly asked her to marry him, and they had the most beautiful wedding in all the land. Everyone was invited, including the kind old lady. Thumbelina was so happy to see her that she cried little dewdrop tears. The old woman promised never to leave her and built a small cottage nearby where she helped Queen Thumbelina and the king raise lots of tiny flower babies, and they all lived happily ever after.
The end. Rapunzel.
Once upon a time, there lived a man and a woman in a tiny cottage in the woods. Behind their house was an enchanted garden with the most beautiful flowers, plants, and vegetables. The garden was surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared to go in because it belonged to an evil witch. The husband and wife's garden was small, and the soil was rocky. They were very poor and could barely grow enough food to eat. Each day they longed to go into the enchanted garden to gather some food to eat. One day the man could not stand it anymore and climbed over the wall and into the garden to gather some vegetables and fruits to bring back to his wife. His wife loved it, and so each day she sent her husband back into the enchanted garden to gather even more food to bring back to her. But one day, when he climbed over the wall, he became very frightened. The evil witch was standing there right in front of him. "How dare you come into my enchanted garden?" she said angrily. The man's voice trembled. "I am sorry, but my wife and I were very hungry and saw that your garden had so much food to offer. Please, if you let me go, I promise not to take any more." The evil witch spoke in a nicer voice. Okay. Well, if you are speaking the truth, then I will allow you to take all the food your wife and you can eat, but on one condition. When you have a child, you must give her to me. I will raise her like I were her mother, and she will be very well taken care of. The man was still terrified of the evil witch, and since he knew his wife must have food to eat, he agreed to give his first child to the witch. A few years passed, and the man and his wife had a baby girl. They kept her hidden away in the cottage so that the evil witch did not see her and would not take her away. The man and woman sang their baby daughter lullabies and read her stories. They loved their girl very much. The man and woman did not know that the evil witch could see them from her castle. She watched them each day play with their daughter. Finally, one day, the evil witch came to their cottage and knocked on the door. "This little child belongs to me now," the witch said in a snarling voice. "I shall now take her to live with me in my castle, and I will name her Rapunzel." Saddened, the man and his wife let the evil witch take their daughter away as the man had promised. Years went by, and Rapunzel was well taken care of as the evil witch said she would be. She had grown up to become one of the most beautiful little girls ever seen. Rapunzel had lovely long hair that was as golden as rays of sun and a fair complexion with eyes of blue that reflected the color of the sky. Rapunzel loved to sing and remembered how her mother and father used to sing her lullabies. She would often find herself with the tower window open, singing to the birds that would fly by. But when Rapunzel turned 12 years old, the evil witch locked her up in the top of a castle tower. But this was no ordinary castle tower. This tower had no door and no way to the top, only a small window that allowed Rapunzel to see the world outside. Rapunzel was not allowed to tell anyone how to get into the tower. When the witch wanted to go inside the tower, she cried out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair." Then the witch would climb up her hair and go inside the castle tower. A few more years went by, and Rapunzel continued to let her hair down to let the evil witch into the tower. But one day, when she was alone in the castle tower, a prince rode by on a beautiful white horse and heard a radiant voice coming from the tower. But when he tried to find the door to go inside to see Rapunzel, he could not find one. Feeling sad that he could not speak to her, he rode home to his castle. He thought of Rapunzel and her delightful singing voice every day and went to listen to her sing every afternoon. One day, as he was resting against a tree outside of the castle tower, he saw the evil witch ride up and yell out to Rapunzel, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair." Curious, the prince kept watching and saw Rapunzel let her long flowing hair down for the witch to climb up. So, the very next day, the prince went back to the castle tower and decided to call out to Rapunzel the same way the evil witch had. "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair!" he shouted. Immediately, Rapunzel let her hair fall down, and the prince climbed up her golden locks into the castle tower. At first, Rapunzel did not know what to say to the prince, as she only saw the witch each day. But once he began to talk to her and tell her how much he loved her beautiful singing voice, she became very comfortable and told him of her life in the castle tower. The prince was in love and asked Rapunzel to marry him. She liked the prince very much and knew the prince would care for her much more than the evil witch did, and so she said yes. Rapunzel and the prince decided the best way for Rapunzel to get down from the tower was for the prince to bring her a bit of silk thread every day, which she would weave into a ladder for her to climb down. But one day, as Rapunzel was weaving the ladder, the witch came and yelled, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair." When the evil witch came inside Rapunzel's room, she saw the ladder and became very angry. "You have betrayed me," she said. With that, the evil witch took a pair of scissors and cut off Rapunzel's lovely golden locks of hair. The next day, when the prince came with more silk thread, the evil witch tricked him by throwing the hair out the window for him to climb up. When he got inside the castle tower, he did not see his darling Rapunzel, but instead the evil witch. "You will never see your Rapunzel again," the witch cackled. "I am taking her to a desert where you will never find her." The prince was so upset that he jumped out of the castle tower and fell onto some thorns, which made him blind. He feared the witch was telling the truth and that he had lost his darling Rapunzel forever. Now blind, he stayed in the forest eating just roots and berries. For years, he stayed away from everyone. But one day he walked and stumbled upon a beautiful lake. There, he heard a beautiful voice he recognized as the sweet, singing sounds of Rapunzel. He walked towards the voice, and it was indeed Rapunzel. When she saw the prince, she recognized him instantly and fell over him weeping. 2 of her tears landed on the prince's eyes, and he could again see. The prince and Rapunzel hugged each other and went to the prince's castle. At that moment, Rapunzel and the prince knew they would live happily ever after. And they did.
The end. The Little Mermaid.
In the deepest part of the furthest ocean stands the castle of the Sea King. Within the castle resides the royal Sea King, his 6 young daughters, and all of his subjects. The sea princesses were all beautiful children and were taken care of by their grandmother. But the Little Mermaid, the youngest of the sisters, was the most beautiful of them all. She was quiet and thoughtful, and cared for nothing but her flowers and a beautiful marble statue she found at the bottom of the sea. The statue, a handsome boy carved of pure white stone, stood in the young princess's garden. Nothing made the Little Mermaid happier than to hear about the world above the sea. She made her old grandmother tell her everything she knew about the ships and the towns and the people and the plants and the animals.
"On your 15th birthday,"
said her grandmother,
"you can go to the surface of the sea and sit on the rocks in the moonlight while the great ships are sailing by. Then you can see the forests and towns with your very own eyes."
At night, the Little Mermaid would gaze out her window, looking up through the dark blue water and imagining the world overhead. She knew that the people on those ships never imagined that such a pretty little mermaid was floating beneath, longing to be among them and waiting so patiently for the 5 years until her 15th birthday.
"Oh, if only I were 15 years old,"
she said.
"I know that I will love the world up above and all the people who live there."
At last, her 15th birthday arrived. As the sun was setting, she raised her head above the waves for the very first time. The clouds were colored with crimson and gold, and through the glimmering twilight, the brightest of the stars began to shine. The sea was calm, and a ship floated idly nearby. There was music and song aboard, and as darkness fell, the reflections of 100 colored lanterns began to dance merrily on the waves. The Little Mermaid swam closer to the ship. She peered inside the cabin windows and saw a group of people laughing and talking happily together. Among them was a handsome young prince with large dark eyes. He was turning 16 years old, and his birthday was cause for much celebration. The sailors danced and sang, and when the prince arrived on deck, more than 100 rockets shot up into the air, bursting with light and showering the little princess with falling stars. Night was falling, Yet the little mermaid could not take her eyes off the ship, or the beautiful prince. Soon, the lights were put out, and the sea started to become restless, and the wind blew faster and harder. Still, she remained, rocking up and down on the water, gazing at the ship. After a while, the sails were hastily unfurled, and the noble ship began to move once again. The waves rose higher and higher, heavy clouds darkened the sky, the lighting appeared in the distance. A dreadful storm was approaching. The ship fought the storm, rushing between the threatening waves. But before long, the ship groaned and creaked. The thick planks gave way under the lashing of the sea, and the waves broke over the deck. They snapped the mast, and soon the ship lay over on her side with the water rushing in. The little mermaid now saw that the crew was in danger. It was so pitch dark that she could not see a single object, but a flash of lightning revealed the whole scene. She could see everyone except the prince. She searched the water and spotted him sinking into the deep waves. She swam frantically among the beams and planks that littered the surface, grabbed hold of him, held his head above the water, and let the waves drift them towards the shore. By morning, the storm had passed and the sea was calm, but not a single piece of the ship was to be seen. With the prince still in her arms, the mermaid kissed his forehead and stroked back his wet hair. He reminded her of the marble statue in her little garden, and she kissed him again, wishing that he might live. Soon they came in sight of land. Carrying the prince, she swam to the beach, and there she laid him on the sand in the warm sunshine. The little mermaid swam away from the shore, but kept her eyes on the poor prince. Before long, a young girl approached the spot where the prince lay. She ran for help, and soon the prince awoke again. The prince was carried away without knowing who had saved him, and the little princess sadly dived into the water, returning to her father's castle. The little mermaid had always been a silent and thoughtful child, but now she was quieter than ever. Her sisters asked her what she had seen at the surface of the water, but she would tell them nothing. Many an evening and morning she swam to the place where she had left the prince. It was her only comfort to sit in her own little garden and fling her arms around the beautiful marble statue that reminded her of him. But she gave up tending her flowers, and they grew in wild confusion over the paths, twining their long leaves and stems round the branches of the trees, so that the whole place became dark and gloomy. Finally, she could bear it no longer and told one of her sisters about the prince. Then the others heard the secret, and very soon it became known to two mermaids who happened to know who the prince was. They had also seen the festival on board the ship that night and told the sisters where the prince's palace stood. His castle was built of bright yellow shining stone with long flights of marble steps, one of which reached quite down to the sea. Now that she knew where he lived, the little mermaid spent many nights on the water near the palace. She would swim much nearer the shore than any of the others ventured to do to watch the young prince in the bright moonlight. Over time, she grew more and more fond of human beings and wished more and more to be able to wander among them in their great wide world. No matter how hard she tried, she could not forget the charming prince. She crept away silently out of her father's palace one day and sat in her own little garden, sad and alone. Then she heard a bugle sounding through the water and thought,
"That must be him up above. Oh, how I would get everything I have for him and for an immortal soul so that I could be with him forever and always. I will go to the sea witch. I know I should not, and she does scare me more than anything else. Maybe she can help me."
So the little mermaid left her garden and swam down the road to the foaming whirlpools where the witch lived. She entered a marshy clearing in the middle of the forest where large, fat water snakes rolled around in the thick black muck. Here stood a house, built with the pieces of all the broken ships ever to be destroyed in the ocean. The sea witch sat nearby and noticed the pretty little mermaid approaching her hut.
"Well, hello, little princess. Don't bother explaining. I know what you want,"
said the sea witch in her raspy voice.
"You shall have your way. It will only bring you sadness, my pretty princess. You want to get rid of your fish's tail and to have legs instead like a human being, so that the young prince may fall in love with you. You are just in time,"
said the witch.
"For after sunrise tomorrow, I should not be able to help you till the end of another year. I will prepare a potion for you. You must swim to land before sunrise and sit down on the shore and drink it. Your tail will shrink into a pair of legs, but everyone will say that you're the prettiest little human being they ever saw. Are you sure you want to risk your happiness for this fleeting moment?
She asked.
Yes, I will,
said the little princess in a trembling voice as she thought of the prince.
But think again. For once you have become human, you can never be a mermaid again. You can never return to your sister's or to your father's palace. And if you do not win the love of the prince, then you will be heartbroken forever. The first morning after he marries another, your heart will break, and you will become nothing more than foam on the crest of the waves. I will do it,
said the mermaid, turning pale as she said this.
Ah, but I must be paid,
cackled the witch.
And it is not a trifle that I ask. You have the sweetest voice of all, and you must give it to me. But if you take away my voice,
said the little mermaid,
what is left of me? Your beautiful form, your graceful walk, and your expressive eyes. Surely with these you can win a man's heart. Well, have you lost your courage? It is a small price to pay for your prince. Oh, okay,
nodded the little mermaid. Then the witch placed her cauldron on the fire to prepare the magic drink. The witch threw tons of ingredients into the pot one after another, and when it began to boil, the sound was like the weeping of a crocodile. When at last the magic potion was ready, it looked like the clearest water.
There it is,
said the witch. The little mermaid turned to leave with the crystal clear potion in her hand like a twinkling star. She swam quickly back through the woods and the marsh and between the rushing whirlpools. She saw that in her father's palace, the torches in the ballroom had gone out, and everyone was asleep. She turned her back, knowing that she would never see them again, and felt as though her heart was about to split into 1,000 pieces. The sun had not yet risen when she came in sight of the prince's palace. There, she drank the magic potion, immediately passing from its strong magic. When the sun arose over the sea, she awoke to find the handsome young prince gazing down at her. He fixed his cold black eyes upon her so earnestly that she had to look away, and then became aware that her fish's tail was gone, and that she had a pretty pair of white legs and tiny feet. The prince asked her who she was and where she came from, and she looked at him mildly and sadly with her deep blue eyes. Oh, how she wanted to tell him everything, but she could not speak. He helped her to her feet, and every step she took was more painful than the last, but she endured it, and stepped lightly and gracefully by the prince's side. He took her into his palace and dressed her in robes of silk and muslin. She was the most beautiful creature in the palace, but she was silenced, and could neither speak nor sing. The prince was enchanted by her and said she should remain with him always. He had a dress made for her so she could ride with him on horseback, and soon the two became best friends. As the days passed, the little mermaid loved the prince more and more, and he loved her too. But he loved her as he would love a little child, and never thought about marrying her. "Yes, you are dear to me," the prince told the little mermaid one day. "You have the best heart, and you are the most devoted to me out of anyone I know. You remind me of a young maiden I once saw, but I will never meet again. I was in a ship that was wrecked, and the waves cast me ashore near a holy temple. A young maiden there found me on the shore and saved my life. I saw her but twice, and she is the only one in the world I could love. You are like her, and you have almost made me forget about her." The princess wanted to cry and tell the prince that she was the maiden, but alas, she could not. And so soon it was announced that the prince must marry, and that the beautiful daughter of the neighboring king would be his wife. "We must travel," said the prince. I must see this beautiful princess my parents want me to, but I cannot love her. She is not like the beautiful maiden who saved me. If I were forced to choose a bride, I would rather choose you with your beautiful eyes." The next morning, the ship sailed into the harbor of a beautiful town belonging to the neighboring king. The church bells were ringing, and from the high tower sounded a flourish of trumpets. Soldiers with colorful banners and glittering bayonets lined the shore to greet the prince and his family. That day was a celebration, full of great dances and festivals in the streets of the palace. At last, the princess entered more beautiful than anyone had imagined. Her skin was delicate and fair, and beneath her long, dark eyelashes, her blue eyes shone and glittered. "You are the most beautiful person I have ever laid eyes on," explained the prince when he saw his bride-to-be. "Oh, I am so happy," said he to the little mermaid. "All my dreams have come true." Struck by the beauty of the princess, he had completely forgotten about the maiden who saved his life. The day of the wedding arrived. Everyone was full of excitement and laughter, but the little mermaid, dressed in silk and gold, was broken-hearted. She had lost everything she had, and that night was to be her last. Later in the day, after the ceremony, the bride and groom boarded the elegant ship that had been prepared for them. It glided away smoothly and lightly over the calm sea. The little mermaid could not help but think about the first time she had seen the surface of the water, on the prince's birthday. Now, she joined in the dancing and had never danced so elegantly before. She knew this was the last evening she would ever see the prince. This was the last time that she would breathe the same air as him, or gaze up at the starry sky and down into the deep sea. The celebration on the ship continued till long after midnight. The little mermaid laughed and danced with everyone, even though her heart was full of pain and sadness. Eventually, it grew darker. The party went to sleep and the ship became quiet. The little mermaid leaned against the side of the ship and watched the horizon, waiting for the sun to rise. Taking one last breath, she flung herself over the edge of the ship into the sea. But as the sun rose, casting its warm rays onto the ocean, the little mermaid did not turn into the water foam that she had expected. Instead, she saw hundreds of beautiful, transparent beings floating all around her.
"Who are you?"
asked the little mermaid.
"We are the fairies of the earth,"
answered one of the figures.
"Because of your kind heart and your good deeds, we have decided to give you your life back in the sea. You truly sacrificed your life for the prince, even dancing with a broken heart on his wedding day. You now know that even though someone else's life might look better, ultimately, you have to be true to yourself."
With that, the earth fairies floated away and the little mermaid grew back her fish feet. She swam to her family, hugged her father, kissed her sisters, and cried with her grandmother. Finally, the little mermaid had discovered true happiness.
The end.